I have another guy that he was kind of abusive. He got thrown out of the army because he was beaten up on his underlings and was a little bit rough. And he was rough on his wife and rough on his kids. And they said, "You're going to some therapy or we're out of here." And that Renegade horse that was in the movie that you saw, he got in the round pen with that horse when I first got Renegade here. And Renegade took no prisoners. You know, that horse had been in a lot of fights with a lot of other horses in his lifetime. And this man walked up to him and started like, "Yeah, I'm going to make you run around this round pen." He was chasing after him, and Renegade spun around and gave him the look and backed this guy down like 5 or 6 times. And the guy said, he came to me later and he said, "You know what? I've never been afraid in my whole life until right then. That was the first time I've ever been afraid. And now I know what it's like to be afraid. I don't ever want to put anybody in my family in that situation where they're afraid again." And that was like this life-changing moment.
Jeez.
Now he's had where his marriage is so much better. His relationships with his kids are so much better because he understands what it's like to have fear like that.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and kind of how you came to be living in the world of horses and Mustangs.
Okay. My name is Jeff Cook. I grew up in Colorado, central Colorado, and my family didn't have horses going in, but they came from Illinois. And when I was really little, we moved to Colorado and they decided to get horses. And I was kind of the first one to make that happen. Did the 4-H thing, all that. Showed horses in that. Went to work for a stable in Castle Rock when I was only probably 13, 14 years old. I'd work weekends there and clean stalls and that kind of thing. But that graduated into, "Hey, you look like you can ride, jump on this one." And so after a while, I started working
They're probably like, "You're young, we want you to get hurt."
Yeah. Here, nobody else wants to ride this one. You can do it, right? You bounce good when you're a kid. But
Yeah.
I went to work for the trainer that was at that place. His name was George Martin, and he showed paints and quarter horses. And so I got into that world pretty early on and was working with him and working at that stable. Worked in the breeding barn, kind of put a career already got started when I was like 13, 14, and I never really wanted to do anything else. My family then
Wow.
bought a dude ranch in Colorado when I was late in high school. So they bought this place up in Gunnison or near Gunnison, Colorado, and they moved up there and got 40 horses, and my brother worked for them for a while, and then they asked me to come up and work for them. So I went up there and did all the shoeing and all the packing and buying horses and selling horses. And while I was there, I got introduced to Mustangs a little bit because we had a guy that worked at the state penitentiary in Canyon City. And he called up and asked us if we would take on a couple of Mustangs and out of their prison program and see how that worked. And I think that was one of the first prison programs in the country. That was like in the early 1980s. And so we took in some Mustangs and kind of had some wild stories about horses that we brought up to the dude ranch up there and tried to make them work as dude horses. And it kind of worked out, kind of didn't. But I got really interested in the whole Mustang thing. Saw a need for that, but I didn't get in deep with it right away. We would take a few on. I'd always have 2 or 3 Mustangs on our place. Mostly the help ended up riding them. We got very few of them that we got to the point where we could just throw the dudes up on them. But it worked out pretty cool. Went back and showed quarter horses and paints for quite a few years after doing the dude ranch stint for a while. And then, I don't know, just somehow I started, I saw one of the Extreme Mustang makeovers, and it was here in Queen Creek, Arizona, and I watched it, and I said, I could do that. And so I jumped into that and went to Fort Worth the next year with a horse and finished just out of the top 10. I was 11th by like a half a point out of the top 10, and decided, this is pretty fun. Yeah, pretty cool deal to do. And so I think I've done like 10 or 12 of those makeovers since then. And we've done pretty good. We've been fan favorite. We've won a couple. We've been reserve champion, high selling horse twice. So that's been pretty fun. And so here we are. I kind of found my spot where we do Mustangs. We still do quarter horses too.
What are you kind of doing at your place these days?
So we kind of have a mix of quarter horses and these Mustangs. So I have an up and coming 2-year-old that's a highbrow cat, smart little bred horse that we really want to try and cut on him a little bit. Or maybe if he doesn't cut, we'll do the working cow horse thing with him and kind of play with that some. We're still doing the Mustangs quite a bit, and we'll have a horse for the next year's Mustang Challenge that it was in Vegas, but now it's going to be moved to Fort Worth this year, but we'll do that one. I had a horse that was supposed to go to the Vegas show this year, and she tore a suspensory ligament about 2 months before the competition, so we had to draw out, and I really missed going to that. They're fun. This next year, we're shooting for one, and I've already picked out a horse, but we're not allowed to adopt him until October 1st, so he's in a holding pattern right now until I can pick him up. But I'm excited about it.
How old were you when you first started working with the Mustangs up on the Dude Ranch?
I guess I was probably early 20s. I think I graduated high school in 1980, so that's giving you my age here. So probably early 20s. I started working with Mustangs.
Yeah. And you said they didn't really work out great for the Dude Ranch. What are some of the things that kind of attracted you to them that kept you on this journey with them? I
got to say that probably the first time that we took some of these things on, I was looking at them as like, man, I'm so cool. I can do something that hardly anybody else can do. There's very few people around the country that are starting, wild horses. And I just thought the romance of it was pretty cool. And it was kind of what I could do for them, and I didn't think a lot about what they could do for me. So as we went along, I found out that that outside of the horse is really good for the inside of the man. With that Mustang thing, them needing our help, and we get so much out of them though that I think sometimes we forget that how much they bring to us. So that I learned that pretty early on, that it's not just about them.
How did those lessons come about? Like, what are some of the things that they've maybe taught you or helped you see?
Well, I think that with a Mustang that's different than the rest of the horses than domestic horses, the difference being that they come into it as a blank slate. And you're kind of the feared and hated man. You've never done anything for them, so they look at you like just any kind of a predator. And so you have to really check in with yourself. Where am I at in this process? If I make a mistake on my 3-year-old quarter horse colt, he goes, "Oh, stupid human," and just lets me get by with it. Whereas that Mustang, he might jump out of the pen because I got too quick with him, or didn't read him correctly. And so I think they teach you how to get yourself into that position where, I truly believe that the only thing that a horse wants from us, and especially a wild horse, is to know that they're safe next to us. That's number one for them. That's kind of all they think about. Am I safe with this human? So I have to present myself as a leader that can get something done and yet not have so much predatory energy that they're afraid of me all the time. They're going to be afraid at first, and I have to work through that fear and teach them that I expect them to do what I ask of them, but they're probably not going to die around me. That's a tough position sometimes to be in. So we have to check in with ourselves. My daughter, who works with me quite often, will hear me say quite a bit, "Get that off your face before you work with a horse." So meaning, if she's upset, she's carrying in some kind of nervous energy or anger at her boyfriend or whatever, that happened that day. That horse knew it before she walked out of the house. Honestly, I can see the look on their face when I walk down to the barn from 500 yards away. What am I bringing to the table? So it makes you really check in with yourself, and you learn a lot about yourself through them.
Yeah, I found the same thing. They really can read your emotions probably better than ourselves sometimes. Like, we may not even realize we're feeling a certain way until we see their reaction with those really sensitive horses.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. They can read the other's heart rate from something like 30 feet away. So they read each other's heart rate, respiration. That's herd mentality that they've grown through thousands or millions of years of evolution, that they've had to learn to read that, read their environment. And yeah, we can walk in there thinking we're the cock of the walk, and it's not always the case with them.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about kind of how your leadership has developed and your philosophies on that. I know you had, and I should have written it down, I know like your description for your company, you talk about the importance of leadership versus management, I think is what you said.
Yeah, I think that, horses, wild horses in particular, are very, herd mentality is everything to them. They're born wondering, what place am I in this herd that I'm in? Their whole life is basically, are you controlling me or am I controlling you? Are you controlling me or am I controlling you? And they have to constantly learn about where their place is in that herd. And I'll have clients will say things to me like, oh, my horse really loves you. Well, I don't believe that. He doesn't really love me. That's kind of sad to hear sometimes, that I don't think they're capable of love. The beauty of that, though, is they're not capable of hate either. So they're somewhere in between. What they see from me is I'm the leader in this place around here, and they want to get close to me because they want that spot. They're never going to be number one here, but they might be number 2 or 3 or 4. So they kind of like to move up into that. So what they need to see from us is strong leadership without being demanding and bossy and unfair. They require fairness of us all the time. And the way that we get that fairness, I think, is that we allow them to make some decisions, and we don't beat them up for making a mistake right away. We allow them to make that mistake, and then we say, no, I want you to go this direction. And that way it'll be easier. So basically, we make good behavior easy, bad behavior difficult, and they start figuring out that, wow, I really like doing the right thing here. It makes my life really easy, and I'm safe.
That safety piece really is huge. And I do think, like you say, they want a leader. They kind of want that guidance so they're not always having to be constantly alert, worrying, stressed out. They really appreciate having that lookout, if you look at it from herd terms a little bit.
Right. Well, and you can imagine if every horse in the herd made his own decisions all the time, that herd would be scattered to the winds all the time. They would never have any organization. They'd never be able to survive like that. And so there has to be, they all look to that 1 or 2 of those leaders to say, what are we going to do now? And they listen to that older mare, or they listen to that stallion when he says, we got to do something right now. And they don't question that authority. And as long as they don't question it, they're safe. They question it, they usually get their butt kicked, and then they go, okay, I get it. I understand. And I think sometimes we go wrong a little bit, especially grain owners or new owners that have Mustangs. They think it's all about, cuddles and kisses and being quiet and gentle all the time, and shows a lack of leadership to that horse as well. If you can't stand up to him and tell him, this is what I want from you, and make it clear, then he goes, well, I guess I have to make a decision now, so I guess I'm leading that person. So now I'm above that person in the pecking order. I'm going to do something bad, or what we would look at as bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that balance is really important. I think in the past, there's been people who have maybe leaned too far to the other side, where it's really about control and forcing a horse to do something. And then a lot of times we see today where, people are too soft, or just letting the horse guide everything. And it really is that in-between space where it's like you can have that respect for the horse, but also expect the same from the horse.
Yeah, life is a balance, isn't it? In almost everything that we do, life is a balance. I often find that really good parents end up making really good horse people, and really bad parents usually are terrible horse people. And, it's kind of the same. It's all the same thing. If that kid feels secure in his relationship, in his family, he knows his place, and he knows that he's going to be taken care of and he's kept safe, he'll listen to when his mom or his dad says, do this. You argue with him, you get the teeth come out, just like what horses do. And so, yeah, I think it works out really well if you have that balance.
That's an interesting comparison. Not surprising, because kids, horses, and even us as people, we really need that leadership, kind of that guidance, that we can take that information in and then make our decisions and kind of figure out how to live and work in this world.
Exactly. I've done a lot of equine therapy work. And I was working for an outfit on the east side of Tucson here once, and we had some kind of movie star people there. I won't say who they were. Um, there was a woman that got in the way of this horse that just about ran her over. And I just grabbed her, pushed her out of the way, and I said, "Get out of the way." She looked at me. I thought she was going to cry. And then I thought that she was going to yell. I was going to get in big trouble. And she said, "You know what? I really love horse people." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because they're direct. They just tell you what they need and what you're supposed to do. And it just makes my life so much easier." And I thought about that. I didn't have any animosity towards this woman. I didn't say I didn't like her, but she was about to get run over. So I just knocked her out of the way and told her to get out of the way. And she really appreciated that. And so often in our life with people, we beat around the bush. Oh, I don't want to hurt feelings. I don't want to, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I got to be so careful. And then the moment's lost already. She just got run over because I didn't say something about it. So I think it's the same with horses. So I think really good horsemen make kind of good humans. Not always. I don't know if it's always the case, but I think usually it's that way.
There is value in not tiptoeing around, whether it's our horses or the people in our lives, and trying to always keep the peace. To some degree, you have to have that confrontation and that conflict kind of come to a middle ground where you guys can both work together, whether it's horses, marriage, kids.
Right. Yeah. Just stand up for what you believe in.
Tell us about the work that you've done with equine therapy and things like that. Is that stuff you've used the Mustangs for?
So I have some equine therapy background. I have kind of been certified in doing equine therapy through a couple of different organizations. And I got to work on this place that I was just talking about on the east end of Tucson, and they did equine therapy, and he had a pretty good following. He'd written a couple of books. The guy's name was Alan Hamilton, and he took an interest in that. I saw how effective that was for people who were sort of doing traditional therapy, where you sit across from a therapist and they would go for years on end, paying that $100 or whatever it was every week to go talk to the therapist. And I always felt like the therapist sort of was stringing them along for, let's just keep this going for a while. And I would find that in a day working with horses, all of a sudden these people were making these giant breakthroughs. And they would say things like, "I've never told anyone this before, and I've never thought of that before, and this changed my life, just this hour in a pen with a horse." And it's really breathtaking to see that happen for people. Then after I worked at that place, I also spent some time at Miraval Resort up here in Catalina. It's near here where I live. And I got to work with Wyatt Webb here. And he wrote a book called It's Not About the Horse. And he was a therapist that did not go through traditional therapy training. Basically, he was a guy that was in a bunch of different big bands. He knew tons of entertainers. He was in Waylon Jennings' band and a couple other things like that. And he a drug problem, addiction problem that was brought on through that lifestyle, and learned that horses could kind of get him out of that situation. And they did. They saved his life. And so he started passing that on to people. And once again, he would get these movie star type people. I mean, he had Charlie Sheen, he had Sharon Stone, tons of people. Ellen DeGeneres went up there, Oprah went up there. Everybody went to this place, and they would spend some time with Wyatt. And they'd only get like a day or a weekend, maybe at most, where they would work with Wyatt. And man, he would get so much out of these people. And he would always say, "It's not me, it's the horses. It's the horses that do it." And I found that really is true. If you just steer them kind of in the right direction a little bit, the horse will open tons of doors, for these people. And so from there, I got to do some work with veterans, and they were like returning combat veterans. The Iraq War was still going on, and Afghanistan things was going on, and these guys would come back and try to assimilate back into society, and they were so struggling with that. And the things that these horses would do just would blow your mind. I have a story I'd like to tell you. It's not real long, but it's a great story. It's a good example. So I had a group of horses, and I had this veterans group that was over working with our horses. And it was the very first day that these guys had been here. And I had this paint gelding that was in this group of horses he didn't get along with the other horses very well. He was kind of a pain. I didn't really think I liked him very much. And this was an experiment to see how it was going to work. So I had 4 horses in my arena, and I had this guy. And he was a corpsman, a Navy corpsman, so he worked with the Marine Corps. He was a medic, basically. And he had seen a lot of really bad stuff, and he was profoundly touched. He had taken lots and lots of drugs. He had done lots and lots of therapy, and he was really in crisis. And we get him in the arena. The horses are all at the other end of the arena, clear down at the other end. And I asked this guy, I said, hey, what would you like to have happen today? And he just looked at me and he said, all I want to do is hug a horse. It's the only thing my whole life I've wanted to hug a horse. And I looked down at the end of the arena, and this paint gelding was up here looking like down at us with his ears up. And he left his herd and he walked all the way down to us, and he walked right up to this guy and put his head right up on his chest. He threw his arms around this horse and cried for like 20 minutes into this horse's neck. Just cried and cried and cried. Took his arms off the horse turned around and walked back to them. Like, it was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. Later on that day, the same guy goes out with another horse it's a wild horse that hadn't been here very long, wasn't broke to lead or anything. This horse goes and lays down in front of him, like 20 feet away from him. He just lays down and stretches out on the ground. And the guy walks right up and plumps down on top of him, like lays on him, like puts his head back, got legs all around him. I'm like, you're about to get killed, but he didn't. And the horse let him do it. And they laid there for 15 minutes on the ground. Once again, he's crying and just this profound thing. And he was so touched by the fact that these horses would let him in. And it was amazing. I don't think I could have done that. I couldn't have walked up to that horse at that point. But there was something in that horse that understood that this man was broken and needed his help. And he just offered it to him. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So once you do a couple of those and you see that happen, it just makes you crave it. You know, you want to make those interactions happen whenever you can. So we try to do what we can for these guys. Yeah. It doesn't always go that way. Sometimes nothing happens and you go, well, that was a waste of time. And then the guy calls 2 weeks later and says that was the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm like, nothing happened. And he says, well, you know, that horse was just like my father. Yeah. And my father did the same things, and we did this, and this is how he compares to my father. And now I can go and talk to this horse like he's my father, and I'm fine now. You know, it's just, yeah, it's amazing. It's the coolest stuff.
Wow. What are some of maybe like the explanations, or what have you seen that the horses do for these people that, you know, where it's like they can be going to therapy for years and then they have this interaction with the horse and suddenly they have this breakthrough?
Well, I think what happens is that well, horses see authenticity. They will not, and especially wild horses, will not put up with being lied to. They never lie to us, and they won't be lied to either. So typically with men especially, men go in and go, I'm not afraid. I got this. Watch me, all you guys. I'm going to go and tame this wild horse in 1 second. And the horse looks at him and goes, I can read your fear from a mile away. And if you're afraid, I'm not getting anywhere near you. There must be something to be afraid of out here, right? So like the corpsman that did that, he was being completely authentic. So what was going on inside here was exactly what he was reflecting on the outside. He said, all I want to do is hug you and throw my arms around you. It's the most greatest desire I've ever had. And this horse goes, okay, no problem. I can do that. And you know, so I think what the horses require of us is authenticity. So we have to go in there and we have to say, I'm afraid. And if you do that, people will go in with a horse and say, I'm really afraid. The horse goes, yeah, me too. I'm afraid too. Let's work this out. And as long as you're being honest with them. I've had other situations with veterans. I have another guy that he was kind of abusive. He got thrown out of the Army because he was beaten up on his underlings and was a little bit rough. And he was rough on his wife and rough on his kids. And they said, you're going to some therapy or we're out of here. And that Renegade horse that was in the movie that you saw, he got in the round pen with that horse when I first got Renegade here. And Renegade took no prisoners. You know, that horse had been in a lot of fights with a lot of other horses in his lifetime. And this man walked up to him and started like, yeah, I'm going to make you run around this round pen. He was chasing after him. And Renegade spun around and gave him the look and backed this guy down like 5 or 6 times. And the guy said, he came to me later and he said, you know what? I've never been afraid in my whole life until right then. That's the first time I've ever been afraid. And now I know what it's like to be afraid. I don't ever want to put anybody in my family in that situation where they're afraid again. And that was like this life-changing moment. Now
Jeez.
he's had where his marriage is so much better. His relationships with his kids are so much better because he understands what it's like to have fear like that. So once again, just the horse
Yeah.
taught it. I didn't have to do anything except watch the horse. So they're amazing
Yeah.
therapists.
That sounds like he was able to be your empathy, for the first time in his life, which
Yes.
that's huge.
Yes, I had a kid once that we were working with, and he was autistic. He had Asperger's, and he was about 14 years old, and he also had hydrocephalus, so he had physical problems too, where his hips didn't work very well, and he didn't have a lot of strength and that kind of thing. But he had like zero empathy. That was, if you fell down and broke your arm, he would laugh and laugh and laugh. But if he scratched his finger, he'd cry all day and be so angry with you that you didn't do something for him. And he learned a lot about empathy with horses too. We would do a game where he would have to give a compliment. So it was kind of a goal for a goal. So I set up a goal and had a horse that used to shove a ball through the goal. Mac wanted to shoot goals like that with the horse, but the goal for Mac, was that he had to give a horse a compliment before he could take a shot. And you wouldn't believe how hard it was for him. For 2 days, he would sit in the middle of the arena and cry because he could not come up with a compliment. And finally, he asked me, he's like, what should I say? And I said, how about like, good job, or you look nice today, something like that. And he finally started coming up with those. Mom called me the next day and said that he had come home that night. She was crying when she called me. And he came up to her and said, Mom, you're pretty. And she just about fell out of her chair. She just died because it was the first time he had ever given anyone a compliment or seen someone else's or had empathy for someone else. And it was just such a beautiful moment, once again, that the horse brought it out.
What other ones do you have? Any other really good horses?
We had a guy that was with us for a long time that was working with us, and he had done like black ops work with the CIA, and he was in the Navy, but then they had put him on these like CIA missions in Central America and also in Asia. And he had done things that some of the things he said that he had to do were I can't imagine a human that had to live through the stuff that he had seen. And he lived with just tremendous amounts of guilt, and the guilt was just driving him bonkers, and he couldn't get along with people. Once again, the horses sort of got him over that guilt mode, and it was all about living in the present moment. What you have done or what you've been is not who you are right now. And so we spent years with him working on that. What you think or what you've been, what you've done is not who you are, the sum total of who you are. A horse could have done millions of things in his life. He doesn't even remember it, half of them. He's just living in what he does right now. He's a product of this moment. And that's where I think people learn so much in the equine therapy and is about how to live right now. And I think that's a gift that for someone like me, anybody who gets to work with horses every day, we sort of have to live right in that moment. While I'm riding one horse, I'm not thinking about what I have to do after I get done riding him. I have to ride him. I got to work on him right now. And the wilder he is, the more I have to concentrate on what's going on right now so that neither of us get hurt. And that's so freeing and so liberating to be able to live like that. And I don't think very many people do nowadays. They're constantly wrapped up in what's next or what just happened or who said something. How do I take that? The horse just goes, all right, bad moment, moving on. He can check in with those bad things that happen, but he just moves on from them. He doesn't have to live there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's huge, especially in our world today where we're trying to live in so many different worlds instead of the one that we're actually in the moment.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more about Renegade. You kind of mentioned him, and I thought his story was a good one to share because it's not the typical story you hear about Mustangs.
Yeah, Renegade is a great story. I wish we could have had that film go longer. There was a lot of things that I now, after seeing the whole final cut, there are things I would probably change in there and add in there. But we tried to make the story not so much about just a horse, but about sort of changing attitudes. This horse, he was 13 years old when he was gathered from the wild, and he shouldn't have been gathered. He was in a group of horses, and the BLM story was that somebody didn't get a gate shut or something, and so he ends up in the online auction, basically, and this woman bought him in the online auction, Stacy Thomas, and she's a good person, a really good person, and she saw that this horse needed, and he was beautiful, big old crazy looking paint. But he was, 13-year-old stallion, scars all over him. That horse had lived, the wild life. He was super wild. And when she asked me to take him on, my first thing was, oh, this would be so cool to make this horse into a nice, gentle saddle horse, and we could go rope on him or do something, and having him show up at places and be the Mustang ambassador for look what humans can do for Mustangs. And, we sort of kind of looked at it like that. Look what I could do for this horse. And as we went along with him, what I found with him is that he would give me all that he could every time. He was so edgy. It was terrifying to ride this horse every time. I got a lot of rides on him, and I never got bucked off of him or anything like that, but I was close a lot of times. It was always like I felt like I just survived a battle after I got off of this horse. And he would look at me the same way and say, I feel like I just barely got through this, and I lived through this thing. You humans don't know how much I have to give here to make this work. And, so by the end of this thing, both Stacy and I talked it over, and time again, we thought, is this something that we should be doing? Just because we can, does that mean that we should? And, my male ego and my cowboy way that I grew up with says, get this horse broke and make it work. And, every time I'd be like, I don't know if we should be doing this. I don't feel right about making this horse do things that are just not in him. He's too old, he's too big, he's too strong, he's too wild. And so we finally did make that. And he did hurt me. He fell on me pretty hard, and he broke my ankle, and he got up and stepped all over me too. It wasn't like just the fall. He got me pretty good. And, I just decided, is this worth this, putting him through this? And we decided, no, the best thing we could do is see if we could find some sort of sanctuary to take him to and let him live out what time he had left. And I'm really glad that she decided that's what we should do. And so he got a chance to be out there in the wild again. And Stacy had even adopted or bought on an online auction one of the mares that was in his little group, one of his band mares that had been with him for years and years. This horse had years of video taken of him. Everybody knew who this horse was that knew Mustangs, and photographers had been out there, and he was very documented. His life was. So she had gotten this mare, and they went together when we turned him out, when we kicked him out on the sanctuary. That was a beautiful thing that he got to live wild again for a little while. Fortunately, they found him dead after a couple of weeks that he was out there. As I explained in the film, horses don't have a time clock. They don't know a week from a day, from a year, from a month. They just don't live that way. So for him to have some time in the wild was pretty profound. He got to at least be wild again. Back to the renegade thing, I think that he just sort of proved to me that, he worked as hard as he could to get along with us as people. And he said, you know what, that's as far as I can go. I'm not going to give you any more. And it was perfect because when we kicked him out on this sanctuary, he spent about a month in a kind of like 100-acre pen. So he got to be in this big pen with his mare to kind of get reacclimated to just being out again. They didn't want to kick him out on 10,000 acres until he was kind of reacclimated. So I got to visit him one last time before we turned him out. And he did a kind of a flyby on me. So he's way at the other end of the pasture, and he came running up Mach 1 like he wanted to. I thought, I'm going to throw my arms around his neck, and he's going to go, Jeff, you're back, yay, that kind of thing. And he ran right up to me. He ran up to me as fast as he could run, and he stopped right in front of me, and he touched my hand and then spun around and ran all the way back to the other end again. So I think what he was, trying to say something like, I recognize you, dude, but I'm wild. I'm not who you think I am. And it was great. It was very touching. I sat down and cried over that. That was a pretty pretty profound thing for him to do. So once again, if we read what they do and we don't blow those things, somebody, you maybe could have just blown that off. Haha, that was funny. But really think about what that meant, for him to go, I'm wild again. Why would he even come up to me? But he did, just to show me something. I don't know, because he doesn't speak English.
It almost sounds like a thank you, especially when it was so uncomfortable for him in the human world. It's like he was trying, but so uncomfortable for him. So for him to then, he doesn't have to be there with you anymore.
No.
To come.
And I like what you just said there, that maybe it was a thank you. And, we can look at it like that. So, with our brain, we could take that as that. Wow, that was so cool. Or we could go, well, he doesn't like me because he came up and touched me and then he left again. He don't want nothing to do with me. Well, that's us spinning that. That wasn't him spinning that. He just did what a horse did. Well, I don't know why he did it, but I'm going to take it as a compliment.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That is something that we do a lot, is put our interpretation on the horses.
Right.
When they're really mostly reacting to what's going on around them, to all the stimuli around them.
Yeah.
We kind of take that and make it about ourselves a lot of the
time.
We're either doing great or we're doing horrible.
Yeah, for sure. Anthropomorphizing can be a big mistake that we make. But take those moments that you do that make you feel something, and feel, what was that I just felt? I felt some kind of connection that I just felt right there. That wasn't an accident. Horses don't do things by accident. That was something. I can interpret it how I want to. That's beautiful. It's empowering.
Yeah, that is a great point, that, even if we are not interpreting it exactly, our interpretation is, we are catching on the energy to, what's happening in the mind of the horse, even if maybe our interpretation isn't 100% on target with what is happening in their world. It is giving us that feedback and that indication of like where the relationship's at.
Right. Yep. And then it teaches us, so if you can read that, if you can read a little bit about what that horse is doing, now you can read that with your children or your husband or your friends. And, try not to read too much into what they're saying, but on the other hand, recognize what you're feeling. That's the big thing. It's recognizing what you feel.
What are some of the lessons or things you've taken away from your time working with Mustangs?
Lessons that I've learned from Mustangs is, one is, don't take things for granted. Probably go right back to that, don't anthropomorphize too much, because, they're going to take care of themselves. And if you're not present with them, reading what they're thinking or reading what their body language is saying, you're going to get hurt. And I have got hurt by quite a few of them for making dumb mistakes myself, taking things for granted maybe a little bit. So I've learned that about each one is an individual. There is no two of these horses that are alike. So it's great when someone has a method and you can go with the method and do the method, and all of a sudden it doesn't work on one particular horse. No two horses are the same, and that I find it interesting that there are methods that are sort of sold, that here's the method, do this, do this. It doesn't mean it's always going to work out, and especially with wild horses. So I'll see a lot of clinicians doing their thing and doing their spiel, and I always go, yeah, let's try that on a wild one, and it doesn't always work. They have different ways of dealing with their environments, and I think their past experiences have made that different for each one. So sometimes the instinct of what they've been through can really play into that training. So one method doesn't work always. I also think that just in general with wild horses, that regardless of how broke we get them and how gentle we get them, most of them still have that wild a little closer to the surface than your quarter horse gelding does. And so sometimes they'll do something that to us looks a little bit stupid or a little bit wild, and it's just because those memories are still really deep in them. Horses never really do forget anything, and so something triggers a reaction from them, and they can go off a little harder than that quarter horse gelding does. So that's one of the reasons why some people don't even want to mess with Mustangs, because they're worried about those kind of reactions and all the things you hear, you can't make a good horse out of them. Well, there's plenty of Mustangs that will prove that wrong, but you do have to remember that wild is always a little bit closer to the surface. So that would be one of the things that I've learned from them, and to just not take anything for granted. If one thing doesn't work, maybe you have to try a little bit different method, being a little bit too bullheaded about what you do. I got a story about that. I had this gelding that I got in it's been about 7 or 8 months ago now. And he was very approachable. Like, he would always turn and face, and he'd want to walk up a little bit, and he had a lot of draw on him. And I liked that. I thought he was going to be really easy to work with until it got anywhere close to me putting a hand on him. And he was not going to have me put a hand on him. And I get people write to me and ask me all the time, well, my horse won't let me touch him. And I have a million different ways of getting that to work. And I used all my million different ways of getting that to work. I'd flip a whip over his back. I'd flip a rope on him, touch him with a stick. I got all that stuff done. If I got my hand anywhere near that horse, he wasn't having it, right? So I was talking to one of my friends who's a Mustang trainer, and I told her about that. And she goes, I got an idea. And I said, don't even tell me. I know what your idea is going to be, and I am not going to do it. Well, the idea was put a glove on the end of a stick and act like it's your hand, right? And I've seen other people do that. And I'm like, I am not going to do that. That's such an amateur move, and there's no way I'm going to do that. Well, in secret, I went out there and I did that. I taped a glove to the end of a stick. And it still took me another probably 2 weeks before I could touch him with my hand, but I finally got him where I could touch him all over with that glove, and finally got a hand on him, and finally got a halter on him. And now he's the gentlest horse on the place. The little kids can go up and catch him, and then, it's not a big thing. But I had to get him over that hump of, you're not going to get that hand on me. You can touch me with anything else, but not your hand. And I even ran him in a buck and shoot, and I wallered all over him with my hands, and he just snorted fire the whole time, and he wasn't having it. So I had to adapt and do something that I really didn't want to do, but I did it, and it worked. But don't tell anybody else I did that.
Secret safe here.
Yeah, right. We're going to broadcast it to everybody. Yeah. Sometimes you got to try something. You got to think outside the box maybe a little bit, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting with the different strategies that are shared, because you have to also take into account where, like, the person that's working with them is, and kind of their state of mind and their skill set. And so, yeah, it can be really important to maybe not limit yourself to, like, I'm just going to follow these specific things, or this is what must happen next in this way. Right. Kind of, you got the horse you got and the person you got. One thing I do want to say on that note that I feel is important, that I try to get this message across to a lot of people. Something that the makeovers has taught me. So, I've done a bunch of these makeovers, and we have like 100 to 120 days to get a horse from completely wild to showing him in Fort Worth or somewhere like that. And we got to get it done. It's got to start happening like pretty quick. If I spend a month trying to get a halter on this horse, I'm out. I'm done. I'm a month is gone already out of 4 months or 3 months. And what I see a lot of on some of these Mustang boards and stuff is people who have had a Mustang for a year or 2 years or 8 months or whatever, and they can't touch him yet, or they can't get a halter on him yet. And that is one of the things that's probably a huge pet peeve for me, is that you're going to sometime need to be able to catch that horse. Something's going to happen. He's going to get hurt. He's going to get stuck somewhere. You're going to have to be sick. You're going to have to catch him. And if you can't, what are you going to do? So you have to make it a priority. And if you don't catch that horse after a time, he starts understanding you're not going to catch me. You can't catch me. You have taught me to avoid being caught. And that's what you're going to have to deal with. So, I've tried to show on my Tuesday trainers tips and that thing about like how to rope them with a breakaway rope, and then rope them with a rope with a block so you don't you don't choke them and that kind of thing. But I think you have to make it a priority. I've got to get a halter on this horse and get him where we can handle him, just for that horse's sake, because you're on borrowed time with him until you can catch him. I think that really is key, is prioritizing it. I think a lot of times it doesn't happen the way we think it might happen. If we put in that time and commitment and the willingness to like learn and try new things, then I think, in most cases, it's definitely something that you can make happen. And sometimes I think you really do need a mentor to kind of help guide you through that process and kind of pick up on the things you might be missing because you don't realize you're doing different things. So I do think that that's good advice, to really prioritize these horses if you're taking them into your life, and make sure you have the things they need to be able to succeed in the human world. Well, and that's one of the beauties about the Mustang world, that the people are it's about the horses. The money is not as big in it, and so it's more about the horses, and people are willing to help. I got guys I still call. I got
I have a long list of guys that I call up if I'm struggling with something, and I'll call them and I'll get a little tip from them, and they're more than willing to help me, and I'm more than willing to help somebody that calls me and asks me. And I just find that in our community, that's kind of how that goes. So, people need to go ahead and reach out and ask those questions. And don't be afraid to. There's no stupid questions. There's just being stupid because you didn't ask the question.
Yeah, I agree. It is a really good community that almost everybody really is in it for the horse. They want what's best for the horse, and they're willing to sacrifice their time and their knowledge and share that with other people.
One thing that seems to be prevalent in the Mustang world, and especially maybe here in Arizona more than other places, is I see a lot of people that get a Mustang, they'll put some time in him, they kind of get him going, and then you see him for sale for $800 or $500. So I want people, we need to make these horses legitimate. If we're going to we need to put some value in them. So if you have a 15 hand gelding that you have 6 months of training in him, keep in mind my training is $1,500 a month. So times that times 6, what's that horse worth? If you're just training alone, he's worth $10, $12, $13,000, right? Something like that. So we have to put that value on these horses and make them sort of legitimize them. So I hate seeing people, just dumping them off for little or nothing. Or they get one and they don't put any time in him, and you get a call. And I've had this horse for 5 years and I can't touch him yet. And he's 12 years old. What's he worth? Well, he's worth nothing. He's worth absolutely nothing. I don't want him. I can go get one for $125 out of the pen, and in a month I got him broke to lead, right? So I don't want that one. So, if you're going to take him on and then make him valuable. The more you teach him, the more he knows, the more valuable he is. And the chances of him ever ending up on that truck to Mexico to get ground up, those chances go way down because he's valuable. He knows something. And why isn't he worth any more than, say a grade gelding that they're advertising for $8,000, $9,000, $10,000? Your Mustang's a grade gelding. He's the same thing. So treat them like what they're worth, and, do it right. Spend the money on them to get it done right. And then you got something that's valuable.
I think that really is a service to the horses. Like if we want them to be protected, to not, like you say, end up on the slaughter trucks, we really can do that by teaching them how to live in the human world, and to give something that people are wanting that does really make them valuable, make them so that they're not so disposable.
Citizen, that good citizen that they can trust their children around and that kind of thing. Boy, he's worth more than his weight in gold. I love the thing when you get this one too all the time. I'm looking for a horse for my kids. And I always go, well, how much do you like the kid? And they'll be like, well, I love the kid. He's my kid. And I'll say, well, I got a gelding here for $12,000, that's really broke, and he'll take care of your kid for the next 20 years. Well, I'm not going to spend $12,000. I want one for $1,200. It's just a kid's horse. Okay, well, here's one that you can have for $1,200. He'll probably kill your kid, but you said you didn't like the kid that much anyways. You know what I mean? So yeah, value is value, and if it's a horse that's worth having, it's worth spending the money on him.
That's really true. And if you're not able or willing to spend the money on, like, you need to be ready to spend lots of time and energy learning and really building the skills that you need so that you can provide that for the horse if you're not able to get that from someone else.
Time is money too, so if you look at this thing, well, I can buy this 4-year-old horse that has very little training on it, and I can buy it for a couple $1,000s. Well, okay, you're going to still put feed and vet bills and another few $1,000s into training. So at the end of it, you still got a $10,000 horse instead of buying that $10,000 horse that might take care of you. So I want people to be realistic about it. And when someone takes on a project like a Mustang, it's a big undertaking. It can be a really serious, difficult undertaking. So have that in mind. I think sometimes the glamour of, I want a wild horse and it only cost me $125. So, this is a great thing. And then after a while you start going, man, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. So think it through and,
Yeah, and I think that's kind of added because there's a lot of great trainers out there doing things really quickly and well with these horses. And so you kind of think, I mean, I kind of had it in my head when I got my first one, like, I'll get it. This will be great, like 3 months and it'll be just this great experience that we have. And you're not taking into account like the time, the energy, the knowledge that these trainers are putting in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you say, it's a project. This is not just like fly by the night, like hop on a horse. You guys are going to each other's eyes and everybody will love each other.
Sometimes we'll have a horse, at a makeover and you run in there bareback and bridleless and run him around the arena and spins and slide stops. And then the owner gets him home and goes, I can't even ride this thing. I can't, he's wild. Well, I only had him 4 months. He goes good for me, but that doesn't mean he's going to go good for you yet. So it might mean he still needs a little more time, but they can put the time in and put the effort in them.
There's a lot of opportunity. They do really amazing things for humans and, helping us figure out how to live in this world better and just the things that we can learn as we really have that effort that we're willing to put into them. They really return that to us, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell everybody where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm located in Tucson, Arizona. We have a website that's dreamhorseaz@hotmail.com. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me, or I'm always on Facebook. You can get me just under my name, Jeff Cook, on Facebook, or Dreamhorse on Facebook, AZ as in Arizona. Look us up on there. I do a thing on Tuesdays. It's just a little give back thing. It's Tuesday Trainer's Tip and just something that I've been asked about or something through the week. And then we'll try to get people some information that way. It's great to have the internet and to be able to look up as many mentors as you possibly can. And I do. I watch every video that comes around. And sometimes I go, yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to do it that way. And other times I'm like, yeah, I get glean a little something from there that I really want to do. So, stay active in that and find some people that are good communicators. But don't put your faith all in one because, like I said, if you start doing everything the same every time, the method doesn't always work. So, be willing to change. Change up your strategies.
Yeah. And I think even Renegade's a really good story of that, obviously everybody that adopts a horse gets it with the intention that you're probably going to ride it and, enjoy life with it. And, certainly that's a great goal and it happens a lot of the time, but be willing for those things that don't work out the way you were anticipating them or expecting them. And
for sure.
Have the grace to be like, oh, this one needs to be free maybe and to find a good situation.
Yeah, getting them free is hard. That's to free them is, once the BLM has gathered them, they're gathered, they ain't going back. You can take them back to the corrals, but they're not going to the wild. But I will say that I really think that maybe 1 in 20 or so is just one that's probably not going to make it for you. And I'm just trying to be realistic, unless now people will say, I can make this one work. Okay, well, how much time and money do you have to put in him? Right? Maybe in 2 years, 3 years, he'll be okay to ride him. I really believe that just to make a good, honest horse out of any of them from the ground up, you're always looking at 2 years to really make a good, solid horse out of one. So, with a Mustang, you got to add in a couple of months of just getting them where they're okay with you even being around them. So it takes time, and that's why those trained horses are worth so much. It's a lot of money gets invested in time in them. So
yeah, I think for sure we underestimate how much time they really need to really, get the whole deal that we're trying to do with them, and for us also.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've kind of backed off on a little bit, like on the makeovers. I love the makeover idea. I think it's really fun. It's really cool, but they started the Mustang Champions one started doing where we got close to a year, 9-10 months on that horse before we showed him. And I love that format. It's so much better to have that kind of time rather than, busting out a horse in 100 days, getting him to the show and you're on by the skin of your teeth a lot for that time, because you're up against that clock. So I like the idea of longer times and maybe not having an auction always at the end of them where you got to sell that horse. Sometimes we sell them and the trainer gets half of what they sell for and we put so much effort and time in them, we don't make that back. So these ones where you keep them a little longer really is good for them, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that that format is changing up and there's some new things coming out to really kind of honor the time and the effort that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff for one-time performance, but then, like you say, is that horse going to be able to do that for the next person?
Yeah, months to months, it's good, and it makes you have you really develop a partnership and a friendship with that horse after you've had him for a while. Like my last year's Vegas horse, man, we were, best friends. That horse went everywhere with me for 9 months, and so it was really special to have him for that long, and he did really well, and now he's with the best owner ever, and she takes such great care of him, and he's pretty happy.
That's great to see. That's what we want for these horses, hopefully, is for them to get kind of that happy ending.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you